Hi, all. Welcome to another installment of our NPS Empower Hour. Really excited. Tonight's topic is of very extreme relevance. It's talking about currently unionized NPS employees. We are joined tonight by Sarah Rieger, one of our NTEU National Councils, to talk about the current units that NTEU already represents of NPS, what that has looked like, what our victories have been, what that process looks like, and talking about current events kind of going on in those chapters. So thank you, Sarah, for being here. I was thinking today that you probably at this point at NTEU have the most experience with our NPS chapters. With you helped organize them, have represented them, and have now continued to help supervise the people who do represent them. Uh, would love for you to tell us a little bit more about your history with the NPS chapters at NTEU and NTEU in general.
Yeah, definitely. So I agree. I've been representing NPS employees since 2014, and I did not help organize Chapter 296, but I definitely did help organize Chapter 336, which is the National Capital Region employees. I've been at NTEU for over 18 years now. The past 3 years, I've been national counsel, so that means I've been supervising attorneys. But I had a lot of hands-on experience with NPS employees. Yeah, I was excited to read a bunch of questions that you and Stephanie got together because NPS is so near and dear to my heart, and NPS has brought such good cases to NTEU, which I shouldn't be telling employees that because if there's good union cases, that means that employees are going through experiences that are not fun for them. But I have loved litigating them. Um, so yeah, you guys have put together a number of questions. So I don't know if I should just try to go through them or if I should
Well, do you want to
yeah.
start with talking a little bit about what does it mean to be in your role as the National Council
Oh,
and a
sure.
little bit about the history? I kind of ran through it quickly as an
Yeah,
introduction, but a little bit more about kind of your history with the NPS chapters. And then I'll be happy to kind of facilitate questions with you as we go through.
great. Okay. Yeah. So I supervise six people who are national field representatives or assistant councils. Each of our locals, we call them chapters in NTEU. So they each get an assigned like attorney essentially. So when I was an assistant counsel, I was with 296 and 336. So I was assigned to those two chapters, which are and our NPS units that we already represent. And so and actually right now, Dan Lechner, he is the person who represents both of them, but he's on paternity leave. So I am again the person who is working directly with 296 and 336 while he's on leave. So I mean, I was talking to them on the Signal app like today, so like just an hour ago. So it's kind of like each chapter has access to an assistant counsel, um, like constantly. We're in constant contact with our, we do like for it to be union leaders, just because otherwise we'd be inundated. So like our
Yeah,
union
fair.
stewards, chapter presidents, and but yeah, we give constant advice. We're talking about what to do about enforcement of an award, like that was what we were talking about, which is actually relevant to some of your questions, but that's what we were talking about tonight. So, um, yeah, that's pretty much my history. I was excited, and I worked on the organizing campaign of the National Capital Region, which was cool. It's a lot of beautiful parks in the DC area.
For sure. It was a good campaign. Um, So you started to talk a little bit about working with the chapters, that you're in contact with them right now about a potential issue. Can you delve into that a little bit more? How field reps and local leaders work with the with you as national counsel, but also with their reps on maybe a case or a potential case?
Yeah, so we are training them. So we, they often like they'll have to file grievances to enforce the contract. And so they will often ask us for advice on the grievances or run them past us or like, what do we do when, whatever is happening? So we will give them advice on what to do. And we also negotiate with them. So if there's a change in working conditions or if there's a contract, I actually I worked for years on an upcoming contract. I guess I'll say upcoming contract because it's not in place yet that would cover both NCR and WASO. And so like it was basically I was on the team and then other like our union stewards or officers, they were negotiating with me. So we were like writing proposals, drafting proposals, um and then, like we do official trainings like where we sit down and we're like this is how you write a grievance, this is like leave policy or whatever the chapter really wants at that moment, but lots of like kind of on the job training where it's like we'll help them do an oral reply or grievance, talk about like how to make a better chapter. I mean, it's like basically we teach them how to be union stewards and everything that comes with that.
Um, and kind of along that, so union stewards are a unique function of having a recognized union. What distinguishes NTEU's approach to representation from employees advocating for themselves without a union?
Well, this is what we do at NTEU. Like, I have been practicing federal sector labor law for 18 years. And so we got like a staff of other people who just do this. Um, so, and we work directly with the chapters. So I think that that's a main distinguishing characteristic.
Alongside the legal recognition that the agency is compelled to work with us versus having
Oh,
to
yeah.
potentially work with individual employees just trying to advocate for themselves.
Yeah. And it's, this is, I mean, I'm not trying to be cute, but it's just funny because like when my kids were little, I would describe it like, would you rather negotiate by yourself or negotiate with all your friends? Like, what is stronger? Like, it's just kind of obvious. I mean, like you're backed by, our legal team, but you also are backed by all of your coworkers. It is like that strength of just speaking for the whole group instead of just trying to like get advantages on your own. Kind of
Yeah.
like, yeah, makes sense to little kids. So I think it makes sense to adults.
Um, so what are some of the things that NPS employees have actually been able to accomplish by joining together as a union?
Um, Gosh, like a lot of stuff in the past 14 years. So are any maintenance employees on the call? There
We
was,
might not have any on the call, but there
oh yeah.
are maintenance employees all across the park units.
So, I mean, my first like big case, and I shouldn't say mine, it's sometimes like, lawyers can be a little bit egotistical, but the employees complained of a problem and brought it to us. So it was like the union's case. And um so it involved snow. And basically, what the National Capital Region did was it would switch the maintenance workers' schedules. And I don't know, this might happen in your parks. But what they did was they would basically tell people, like, instead of coming in 6 a.m. until 3:30, you're going to come in from 6 p.m. until 6 a.m. And guess what? There's no overtime because that's like that's 6 hours one day, 6 hours the other day. they were even doing crazy things like making them put in leave because they were like, well, we can't give you admin time for the 3 hours you didn't work on this day. It was a complete mess. So that was way back in the day. But it was like, NTEU we started representing employees and we tackled that issue and won an arbitration. And really, like the maintenance worker, the president at the time, he was championing the issue. And so we did some research, and you guys, there's a 40-hour work week. So, like, because of unions, and there's a law that basically says employees, have to have regular work hours. And so their schedules can be switched. It's like a hard standard, which the Park Service did not meet at that time. And they screwed up the overtime pay. And anyway, ultimately, employees got up to $1,000 in back pay. So like 100 maintenance employees got up to 1,000 hours in back pay, depending how much they missed, how many hours they worked that were not part of their schedule.
Did
So
that change how the policy was in effect moving forward as well?
it did. It changed how it was. I mean, basically, employees get their overtime pay. This still happens on rare occasion. It probably did happen over the past weekend, but it's much rarer. They were doing it all winter, and now they're paid appropriately.
Yeah, that's a really big one. Being able to talk about actual money going back in people's pockets. Are there other accomplishments that you'd
Yeah,
want
I
to share
mean,
about?
um, telework. This is one that is a big one. We just won two, and this was by Dan Lechner. He did the cases, but like alongside the chapter because the chapters worked on the grievances. But there were two telework grievances. They were actually Biden era because when Biden was president, he created these rules that people had to come in 50% of the time. And in our 336 contract, we negotiated for up to 3 days per week of telework. And in our 296, our WASO contract, we negotiated no limit. So these policies contradicted both contracts, and we won both. And so at WASO, they didn't appeal the decision. So at 336, they did appeal the decision, and so it hasn't been implemented. Um, and I know there's some questions related to
Yeah,
implement.
dive in. This is great.
Yeah, so at WASO, people are now, and I hate that this is being circulated because I'm afraid if people know, it will um it just like put a spotlight on it. But now at WASO, people are actually teleworking. But the award implementation has not been perfect. And we actually have they're they're implementing it in a weird way. Like it's no problem for people who were teleworkers before we filed the grievance, but they've just been implementing it weird for remote workers and people who want to change their schedules. So we're sort of still ironing it out. And also, we are going to have to go to arbitration for remote workers because of they weren't impacted by the Biden era um, telework directive. You guys, was that
Can
too
you?
much? I don't know if there's any. I
No,
feel
so
like
I think would
yeah,
it
okay.
would you be able to, for maybe someone who doesn't understand what a grievance procedure looks like, maybe use the WASO telework grievance as a kind of take us through what does that timeline look like? How did it start? What did the chapter do? They figured out there was a problem and then they talked to their rep and then they went through the grievance. You kind of talk us through what that actually looks like for people who have never had a grievance procedure before.
Yeah. So we have a contract. This is what it looks like. It's has like Lincoln Memorial on it. But anyway, we have a contract. And so as soon as it starts getting violated, basically union stewards, union members, they're like, it's like with the telework, it's a big one because they can't telework anymore, and they get this directive, and they're like, "What's the union going to do?" Um, so then there's like a grievance is any violation of law, rule, or regulation. So it could be a violation of contract, or it could be a violation of like really any law. So it's like wrong, basically. So we like a union steward will write it up and say how management, how the Park Service has violated a law, rule, or regulation. So in this case, it was pretty clear, that we had no limit for our collective bargaining agreement on telework. So it was pretty clear what the violation was. It doesn't even have to be that long. Like I could write a grievance for this in the chat in about 2 minutes. So, yeah, and then you say what you want. What are you trying to get out of the grievance? And so, what we were trying to get is stop doing this. Like, don't enforce a limit on telework. And you argue the grievance. So, with typically it's the first line supervisor. For a grievance like that, it's a little bit different, but you argue the grievance, the union steward will argue it with the first line supervisor, and then they take it to the next level, so which is typically a second level supervisor. And then if we don't reach an agreement, and actually usually we do reach agreement. Something huge like this, no, but a lot of like there's questions about performance appraisals, and I don't see many of those because those are usually resolved during the grievance procedure. So meaning like within the National Park Service. But if if we can't resolve it, then the union can go to arbitration. And an arbitrator is just like it's like a judge, but it's chosen by the parties. So like we, along with the Park Service, we will basically pick a list from the federal mediation. There's like a place you can go to get a list of arbitrators, and then we go back and forth and meet in the middle, essentially, pick a if we can't pick an arbitrator, if we can't just agree. Sometimes we just are like, this person's fine, and then the other side is like, this is fine. And those decisions by the arbitrators, you have like a mini hearing, and those are binding. I once had an arbitrator brag that he told his judge friends that judges can be appealed, but what he says is final and binding, which is mostly true. But um, so yeah, arbitration has the force of law.
So, with this Hellover case, the chapter discussed it with NTEU, and we assisted with processing that grievance with the agency up to the point that we couldn't agree with them. And so then there was a decision: do we take this case to arbitration? And we decided yes. And we presented a case to the arbitrator, like you were saying, like kind of like going to court. And about how long did it take from the point of filing that very first grievance to getting to arbitration? And then how much longer did it take to get that decision from the arbitrator?
Yeah, I mean, it took about a year, less than a year actually for this one, but it was maybe a little bit more, but it was very odd because there was a moratorium and, we filed the grievance and for a bit, at least with WASO, no, actually both WASO and the National Capital Region, they were like, we're not going to implement it. Okay, so they sort of went back and said, okay, we're not going to. And then actually, the election happened, and then they were like, "No, we're going back. We're going to implement this decision." And so for those, it was less than a year. I think we ended up going forward with the grievances in like January and March, and we had decisions by August, and we just got one in December. But so one of them was implemented within a year, more or less, like I said, one's being appealed. So that one could take longer. Well, it
And
will.
is
Yeah.
that normal for cases that we take to arbitration? What do you normally advise chapters to expect if they're going to take a case to arbitration?
Um, yeah, I mean, that's pretty speedy, actually. So, I mean, it was really important issues, so we tried to schedule it quickly. But I th I think it's, could be a little bit more like 18 months. I mean, which I know it sounds long, but it's quicker than almost any other legal avenue.
Yeah,
And
I think that that NPS employees are really just looking for understanding the process. And sometimes I think a lot of people understand that sometimes these processes can take a while, but knowing that there is that process that we can see through, that we know what is the next step and what's expected of each side at that is
yeah,
something that, yeah.
and keep in mind, most grievances do not go to arbitration. So grievance will get um, some kind of resolution within a few months, like during the grievance procedure. I mean, we definitely are always trying to resolve the issue. I mean, employees don't really like, it's not like fun to be, having a grievance against your employer. I mean, it's good. It's good, and it helps, keep management in check and also just have a better working relationship and work life. But most employees, they're not super excited to just have an ongoing grievance. Um, so I think that they like to get them resolved.
That's understandable. What about if you've reached, the union's reached a agreement, a resolution for a grievance with the agency, either through the grievance procedure or through an actual arbitrator's decision, and the agency, for whatever reason, is um, resisting or kind of slow walking the implementation of what's been agreed or ordered. Are there things that NTEU, that the union can do to enforce compliance?
Yeah, there used to be when the rule of law was was it was appreciated, but no, there still are. They definitely it's more grievances or unfair labor practice filings. So
What's an
um,
unfair labor practice
yeah,
filing?
you guys are not gonna, I can't explain it to you so that you'll know it by the end of the conversation, but an unfair labor practice is like a violation of the labor statute. So it's just a little bit different because when I told you what a grievance was, it's any violation of law, rule, or regulation, and unfair labor practice is just the labor statute. So yeah, so we could file a charge. There's an agency that enforces and investigates unfair labor practices. So it's basically more litigation. But
Which agency is that?
the Federal Labor Relations Authority.
So the same agency that's actually going to be regulating elections for all of the NPS employees that are seeking elections. It's that
True,
same
true.
agency
Yeah.
that helps govern relations between unions and the federal agencies. And this is another thing that they also do.
Yep, exactly. Yep. Smart. So
Um,
yeah.
okay,
They
so we
have like due
can use the
representation.
law
Yeah.
if they're slow walking. Are there other things that chapters have done if the agency is slow walking or?
I mean, we try to leverage our relationships. And that we try to do first before doing litigation. So, um, yeah, like with this telework decision, we don't like how implementation is going. They've implemented it for most people, but they are kind of slow walking it. And um, so we've just been using an approach where we're like in contact with labor relations. We are in contact with the solicitor's office at the Department of Interior, telling them about implementation, and we are trying to handle it that way. Which that's that's better than more litigation because obviously it's timely.
Yeah, and a lot of uh, the chapter's work is building relationships with the agency, and like you were saying, that's how we end up resolving a lot of grievances at the lower levels, is utilizing that. That it isn't always taking everything to a legal fight. That we are building relationships on purpose so that we can try and resolve things without resorting to that.
Yep.
Um. Okay, well, I think actually this is a really good time, Stephanie, if you want. I'm gonna hand over facilitation to Stephanie, the other organizer, working with, oh, I didn't even introduce myself. I've been so bad about this every single Empower Hour. I'm Lee Fisher. I'm the NTEU organizer that works with Intermountain region. I'm going to hand it over to Stephanie Snow, the organizer working with the Pacific West region.
Thank you, Lee. As Lee said, I've been working with the Pacific West region, and I don't know, Sarah, how much background you got on this campaign, but we have filed petitions for the IMR region, so the region that Lee's working with, and the Pacific West region, the region that I'm working with. And before I get into those other questions that are kind of my half of the program, one thing I was thinking about as you were talking kind of early on, um, is that, especially with the National Capital Region, you were very much involved in the process of them organizing and kind of like at the same spot that our two regions are at now with, going to an election and then following that election having to stand up a new chapter. And so I was wondering if maybe you could just touch on your experience with that, with standing up the Chapter 336, the National Capital Region, and maybe let people know on this session what they might expect moving into that election and then beyond that election as they stand up their individual chapters.
Yeah, well, please volunteer. Like when I talk about chapter leaders, I mean, it is a team. It really, it's so important. And especially one thing that's very hard with park service people is that a lot of you are probably not co-located. So you've got to stay in touch with each other. There's still struggles with the capital region because of that, because everyone is, I mean, Zoom has kind of made it easier, but like in texting, but it if like what I've said or Stephanie and Lee have said about the union, if any of those aspects sound interesting to you, there's a role for you in the union. And it is a lot of work to stand up a chapter. Because I mean, you have to like file stuff with the DOL. I mean, we will help you through it. We have experts at NTEU. We can lead you through all of the processes. But like if filing a grievance sounds intimidating, like we're gonna hold your hand. I mean, usually like with my team, it's like, okay, let's show, we'll do it once and then you can do it the next time. But also just keep in mind, like, you don't have to be the lawyer to file a grievance. You're reading a contract and finding a violation. But, you know, we we are here, like I said, to just hold their hands. Um, so yeah, I mean, getting like excited, negotiating a contract, it can be a lot of fun. Yeah, some of the people at NTEU like that better than I do. I really like the grievance aspect more. Um, but that's it's just kind of like, what do you like? I actually like, I'm sure there's people who like just keeping people informed. Like that is such an important part of the union more than anything. Just like knowing who to go to if you have a work issue, and also just like knowing what the union does. I those are really important aspects. So I think I answered the question, but did I miss anything?
Yeah, I know you definitely answered it. And then, the other thing that I was thinking too, which you touched on in your answer, I don't know if you want to expound on it anymore, but these regions that we're working with right now are vast geographically. People are really, far apart. And so moving into, bargaining a contract and just making sure that all voices are heard across, job classifications and geography and all the things. That's been a thing that we've been talking about a lot with these groups or with these two regions, is, how we make sure that everybody has a voice, and that voice is raised. And so I don't know if you have anything to add about that or want to touch on that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So, this is a kind of unique thing that we have in the capital region contract, which we would like to get rid of actually, but it's important in like, so let me just tell you what it is. It's like basically we have an allotment of stewards for each park. And so we don't want that because we just like in some parks we have so many people who want to be stewards, and then in other parks there's no representation. But I mean, ideally you have a steward at every park who's communicating with the union president and with the vice president and just like in the loop. So when people at their park either have a problem, like they know where to go, and they also can keep their coworkers informed of what's going on. I mean, email is good, but in the National Capital Region, not everyone checks their email very often. So it's like some people are just not as good with it.
Great, thank
I
you.
mean, yeah, that's the ideal way to do it. Um, yeah.
Awesome. One of the things that we've been hearing a lot about over the last few weeks is EPAP evaluations and the changes that have been made in that and this sort of instituting a sort of unsaid quota system, or in some cases actually a said quota system.
Yeah, I think
Um,
you're saying
but
it.
yeah, and so I was just wondering if you could give us a little insight on what might be happening with our existing chapters with that issue, um, and what kind of path NTEU might be taking to address those concerns.
Yeah. So at least at one of the chapters, maybe both, we filed what's called a mass grievance. So well, it's like mass. And so basically, like you're supposed to be rated, and this isn't just contractual. This is also like NPS policy and regulations, but you're supposed to be rated against your standards, not against some kind of quota. Because that's just like you're not getting rated against your standards if there's a quota. So we filed a grievance. And um, it impacts everyone because like lots of people still are like, hey, will you file my grievance? And it's like you're actually covered under our mass grievance. So in that situation, we've just been able to file one grievance on behalf of everybody. Um,
And
and
when you say file a grievance, where do you file that grievance to?
Yeah, with this one, it's I think like it's with the senior manager or head of labor relations or something like that. I have to check my handy contract to look at where exactly we filed it. But I said earlier, most grievances go to your first level supervisor, but if it's a bigger kind of grievance, it may be different.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, we'll ask essentially that everyone be rated like in accordance with the contract so that they get accurate ratings um, in the grievance. So there was a question on the list that you sent me about um, what people can do if they're unrepresented, and not much. I think you do have like an administrative grievance procedure, and I've heard stories of people winning grievances there, but I've never. It's just like almost like folklore. I've never ever actually seen that happen. So yeah, I mean, but we have a good track record like when we take grievances. So um yeah, not we don't win every single one, but I mean most don't go to arbitration, but that's because there's been some kind of positive resolution. And then when we end up in litigation, we do mostly win.
Right. So in this case, the path that this grievance would take would be through the agency administration, those paths, and then ultimately, if there's no resolution reached, would end up with an arbitrator. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
Eliza, just I noticed her question. It's right on point. Unfortunately, this grievance would not impact you yet because so you have to be covered by a collective bargaining agreement, and um, and you're not covered by one yet. So it only for the people that we represent, essentially,
At this point, yes.
at this point. Yeah.
So when we have issues, depending on what that issue is, I maybe keep pressing this point too much, but just for clarification, there are different paths that NTEU can take. Filing a mass grievance or a grievance is one. And you said you mentioned a ULP is another.
Mhm.
And then, if I'm correct, then the other path would be just filing a lawsuit like we've done against some of the executive orders that have come out. Are those the three main paths?
Yeah, it's very hard to get into court though, I will say, just because like that's why we have the grievance procedure. So if we can file a grievance, there's essentially no way to go to court. That's long story short. So if it's something that we can file a grievance over, and that's way oversimplified, but if it's a violation of the contract, essentially we file grievance. Violation of the labor statute, um we go to the Federal Labor Relations Authority. We can or file a grievance, but court is, um, yeah, it's hard to get to, and there's this. It's more than we can talk about tonight, but we
Sure.
have filed a bunch more lawsuits than we normally do in the past year.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so I'm thinking like things like the executive orders and that
Yep.
those bigger kind of issues, then the lawsuit is our sort of big path to remedy those. And then we have the smaller paths or shorter paths that we can also utilize depending on the issue. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Um, Is there anything now, of course, you're talking to people who aren't represented yet, and you said, in terms of like this mass grievance, they're not part of that, but just for advice, what can they be doing with this EPAP issue in the meantime? Or do you advise like documenting or, what kind of things can a person, well, I mean, even if they are represented by us, should they be doing if they feel like they've been, mishandled with this EPAP situation?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see why that would hurt to use the administrative grievance procedure or document. I mean, um, it's kind of tough, because NPS is just kind of they set out to just treat everybody unfairly. So, um, I don't know how they will respond to that. Um, Yeah, I mean, that's always good advice
Mm-hmm.
to, like understand what your performance standards are and what you've done, and, take advantage of every opportunity to provide input. There's a reconsideration process at NPS. So I do think that has worked for some people. If you have really good documentation. So I don't see why you wouldn't take advantage of that. But yeah, like they're like, if there's just a limit on ratings, which like we've seen that they're limiting the highest ratings, then I don't know. They're kind of like, we're not gonna rate you against your standards.
Right.
But
Well,
it's
and
worth a shot.
we have had situations where, people had already received a rating and then it was downgraded. And so in those cases, typically, I mean, what I advise, and certainly I'd like to, hear what you would say is just, and I think we've been telling people this like since January of last year, keep an eye on all of your personnel documentation, download it, make copies so that you have that sort of paper trail.
Yeah, yeah, very good advice. Especially because we are hearing that right now with the EPAPs, like your first level supervisors, like I'm going to give you 4.5, and then it's basically crossed off by the second level supervisor. So yeah, like, um, and I think this is the same thing is happening in WASO, where the original version is just disappearing from so yeah, definitely. That's great advice.
I was just looking over in the chat to see if we had any questions that we haven't fielded yet. Um, I see Joni jumped in and said that our Midwest region people are organizing and we want to reach out to them if we have friends in the Midwest region and bring them on board and provide them with information.
Um,
let's see. Um, Nico, we have had some reports of people who did a formal appeal of their rating and had it corrected back to the original rating. So that would probably be from the Pacific West region. And I know that as people were experiencing this, I have received some, copies of the appeals that people are doing just kind of to keep NTEU in the loop. So I know all those things are happening in addition to the grievance as it works its way through the system as well. I would like to open it up to questions. I'm sure we have quite a lot of questions for Sarah this evening. So if you have a question, you can continue to use the chat, raise your hand, or you can just unmute yourself and ask the question. We want to just make sure that while we have the expertise of Sarah with us tonight, that we get all the questions answered that folks might have.
Yeah, let's do it.
And I can't see everybody's if you raise your hand. So, if you want to just unmute and ask your question, that's fine.
While folks are thinking about questions, it does look like we had two earlier questions in the chat about bargaining.
Oh, okay.
Um, One was uh, as they're going into bargaining, is it unlikely that they would be able to bargain for telework in their first contract since the current administration has mostly ended it?
Um, that's a very good question. Um, so we usually, geez, if only a contract was so quick. If a contract were quick to negotiate, then we'd be in trouble. But they often take a long time. So I'm sure we're going to think out a way. Like basically, the first thing you negotiate when you negotiate a contract is what's called ground rules, and that's basically how you're going to negotiate the contract. So when we negotiate those, we've got to basically um, think about how we can um, I'm changing my mind as I will just submit a telework article. And probably like honestly, when we negotiated this, we have a contract that's held up because of the administration change, basically, like if I'm way oversimplifying it. Um, but uh it took forever to like we would do the easy things first, and so I think telework would be something that we would hold off on until the end because we just wouldn't have an agreement, and that would be normal. Telework is always one of the toughest things to negotiate, so um
That seems to kind of go along with if you want to kind of keep going with the other question, which was what should chapters expect to be able to negotiate in an initial contract? I would say maybe in general, but then there's also the question specific to negotiating with a hostile administration.
yeah, I mean, geez, like this, so the NCR contract, um it was, yeah, it took like, well, and just like, I hate to say it, but it took 4 years. I remember that NPS was dragging their feet for ground rules. So it took forever just to negotiate how to negotiate the contract. Um, so yeah, if NPS can drag their feet when they don't want to negotiate, I mean, that's not something the union would do, but it's something that like we're not going to agree to a telework article that doesn't have telework. That's just and NTE wouldn't do something like that.
Are there other things that folks can expect in a first contract? What are the kinds of things that uh,
Yeah, that's a good question.
and
Because
there, along with that, about how long does a first contract take? We often say like at least a year, but that may be even longer now.
yeah, I mean, so Yeah, it definitely takes at least a year. And I wouldn't expect to have every single right that you want in your first contract. And I mean, it's just tricky. Like this NCR contract, we basically, I think we wrapped it up because like there was a change in administration, and one administration like just doesn't favor unions or federal employees. So um, yeah, so sometimes like that can make things go more quickly, or it also can make things go more slowly. Um, so yeah, sorry for the non-answer, Lee. Um, we worked on that. So anyway, the first contract it didn't have everything. So then we decided to but this WASO contract, it's like the second contract that we have, and it's really good. It's very strong. It just got stronger. And so the idea was to negotiate one contract that covered them both, and that's the contract that was the holdup, or it's being held up now. So that took about 2 years to negotiate that contract. And now it's being held up, but they both have contracts in place, and there's still pretty strong contracts. Someone said that they like the in the weeds conversation, so I feel like I'm getting very in the weeds. So I hope you like that, but I might not be applicable to a lot of people, or is just too much.
Can you talk a little bit? You talked about ground rules, and even before that, can you talk a little bit about what the negotiations committees look like, or who's in the room, the team on each side, what those groups are comprised of? Especially, there was a question in the chat about the agency level. At what level of the agency are you negotiating with? So, what the teams look like?
Yeah, okay. Let me think on this. So, for the past contract, the first one with National Capital Region, there were lots of superintendents involved in the parks. So there would be like um, labor relations type people, like people who are paid by management to represent management. And then there were like parks superintendents or deputy superintendents. But the last time that I was on the committee that negotiated the contract that covered both our NPS units, it was just labor relations people and HR folks. But our team, like we do try to diversify it and have different voices in terms of, and I'm talking ideally because sometimes it turns out that people on the team are really like too busy, but ideally we have like maintenance, we have people from different parks, we have rangers, we have office workers. So because I can't really negotiate without like a team of NPS employees who are telling me the ins and outs of the jobs because I'm not a park ranger, so I don't know what the issues are. But we also try to engage the membership as much as possible by surveying to find out what's going on, and communicating with them so that everyone, is vested and has a vested interest in the outcome.
There were a couple of questions about, could you just maybe touch on some other NPS wins other than the telework and, and the grievance that we filed for the EPAP issue, but just looking back, what are maybe some other wins that
Oh
either
yeah.
stand out in your mind or just really good accomplishments that you got into the contract, things like that?
Yeah. That's I love that question. So we had this was not me, this was another person, but I was very involved in figuring out the issue. So we had a bunch of term employees who they were recruited to work for oh, gosh, you guys, what's it called?
All right.
Yeah, all right. But but what is the program called? They were instructors at the program fundamentals. So some of you might have gone to fundamentals. But yeah, they were recruited to work there. And then the union started getting involved because they were being treated so poorly and there were so many issues. And so then basically they were all fired. And long story short, as soon as the union got involved. So someone from our Denver office took that case to arbitration. And I mean, we tried everything first. Like we were talking to like people very high up in the agency to try to fix it. And they just wouldn't listen to us. So we filed a grievance and ended up getting like compensatory damages and lots of money for the employees because they were retaliated against for union activity. And I used to think before I had Park Service, before I started representing Park Service employees, I didn't think there was that much union retaliation in the federal government. But Park Service proved me wrong. So I had a couple of retaliation cases. So, I mean, it's very important. Like, we have to represent, like, if people are retaliated against for using their union rights, that just like goes to the core of what we do. And like, so there were a couple of term employees at a park who they were the only two people who had filed grievances, and one had actually complained of racism. And so their terms were renewable for a year, and we grieved those and won both of those cases. Ultimately, had to go to arbitration. So, like, we will protect employees from against retaliation, and we've had like really good victories in that area. Um, but stewards have had really good wins also, like performance appraisals. That's just countless. I'm not even kidding. Like I have no idea how many performance appraisal issues union stewards have resolved, like that have not come to our desk at all. But gosh, once there was this time, it just sticks out in my memory because it was just so disgusting. Employees at a park were being asked to clean out the porta potties, and that was like something that the union steward fixed in like one phone call. But the employees just, they had been doing it for a while, and then they complained, and it was just fixed right away. Um, so yeah, I think stuff like anything. Definitely like the Washington Monument sometimes has been too hot, and it like we'll complain like the air conditioning's not working, and then suddenly there's huge fans brought in. Um, yeah, anything else? Maybe that's all I can think of off the top of my head, but um, it's
Yeah,
been a time,
there's
so.
been stuff popping up in the chat that I haven't gotten to, so I don't know, Lee, if you've been following the questions, and if you have, maybe you can just jump in. Otherwise, I'm going to go over here and read them.
Yeah, I answered one, Sarah. I'll make sure that I'll check with you that the question was what happened with the contract that we negotiated for WASO and NCR together. My answer was that the agency agreed to it under the previous administration, but then it went for final approval after this administration was in place, and so it has not received that final approval as a short answer.
Yeah, it was actually, so it didn't pass what's called agency head review because of
Okay.
telework. Yep. So now we have to just, I mean, my vision is that we have to like just make some, because it actually went to um like it's called another little agency that's part of the FLRA, another arm that they do impasse resolutions. And so the impasse panel actually had some problems with our telework article, just minor problems. But we are a bit worried about whether National Park Service will now like try to take a sledgehammer to our agreement. So I mean, only telework is the only thing that we'll be negotiating. Um, so yeah, that's the holdup.
Oh, let's see here. Trying to see, make sure I got all the questions. There's just a comment about, and I'm sure it's not unique to NPS that people are just feeling like really spread thin and, worn, worn out after this whole year. And just just saying that all of these firsthand examples from you of the way that you've been able to tackle these issues, even in spite of this administration, is very helpful and insightful, I think, for people who are um, in this process of trying to gain representation.
Yeah, and I mean, these issues, this is really like it's the employees who NTEU represents who are bringing them out, right? Like this is just, and they have the power through their union to do something about it. So, like, this is the power that you would have.
And we often tell as when we're in the organizing process and that it will be a while, right, till you get a contract, and especially in the current climate. But there are things that you can do in the meantime, like once your union is certified and your union has established itself, the chapter has stood up, then there, in that interim period, what kind of rights do members have until we get to the ultimately to that collectively bargained agreement?
Yeah, actually, we were very, very busy for the 4 years or well, we did have they had a basic contract. But I mean, there's still rules that apply. Like management, there will be a lot of bargaining because management's obligated to bargain all changes in working conditions that are more than de minimis. So even without a contract, there are a lot of rights that NTEU can enforce. And yeah, we were very, very busy. I remember like we negotiated over 100 different like issues the first year and the second year. Like while we didn't have a contract, it was just constant negotiation of tiny issues. So, and luckily NTEU has like we have a negotiations team, so like a department. So for the first contract, for the most part, someone else was doing the contract negotiation, and I was helping the chapter with those 100+ issues.
Do you remember an example? Not to put you on the spot.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just like it was like everything. So, like changes in working schedules. Oh, and this is a cool one that came up actually that I didn't. So, alternative work schedules. There's actually a law that protects alternative work schedules. So, it's pretty hard to take. The agency has to show that there's an adverse impact on work operations to take someone off of a alternative work schedule. So, like Parks would try to change it and we'd be like, oh, no, 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 you can't do this. What's your adverse impact? And so it was actually like we taught the agency a lot because they just didn't know some of these rules. Um, so things like that happen less and less. But like we also had to litigate it sometimes where they just, took people off of their alternative work schedules because it was inconvenient. Like the
Right.
manager was like, I want to be able to see everybody. And it's like, oh, is that really an adverse impact?
Um, let's see what else here. If I missed any of your questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask. Otherwise, we're going to try to wrap up here. We did have a question from Eliza asking, can I tell my park folks that even if it takes 4 years to get a contract, the union will still support them if the agency breaks the law in the meantime? I think you answered that pretty well. Um, and not only just breaks the law, but also wants to make big changes to your working environment, they still have to consult the union, even if in absence of a contract, the first contract.
Yeah, and there's we still have the EEOC and the MSPB. So, even without arbitration, that's what we're doing because right now there are some units that don't have contracts because of the change in administrations. And so we're just doing representation in different forums. So we're going to, like the Merit Systems Protection Board, they handle like suspensions that are more than 14 days up to removal. So we're going there. If there's discrimination, we have the EEOC.
Tell us a little bit about MSPB in terms of functionality right now. Thank you.
Yeah, it's still actually working. We have like a bunch of appeals there right now. So yeah, right now we have litigation from like HHS. You guys pay attention to the news at all? They rift a lot of people, and so we're representing lots and lots of employees there. And so, yeah, every day something new is happening with that. Little, but they're making the agency justify the rifts. So, which is, what there's so no, it's not dead. It's still functioning. So actually kind of, optimistic. Hopefully, employees will get a good outcome.
And then this other question is really more procedural, I guess, for us organizers. So the way that this will work when we get to our elections for the regions, and once our regional chapters are certified, it'll work much like it does with the National Capital Region, where it's not individual parks having to negotiate separate contracts. It'll be one contract negotiated that will cover the parks and employees and programs within that region that are named in the petition that we filed. And then we have a number of parks in each region that were not on our initial petition. So what we hope to do with those who are in the organizing process, but they just didn't get their numbers in time to get on the first petition. Once we have our chapter established, then we will go with those parks that reach their number threshold and file a petition to have them have an election, but then to be added into that existing chapter that we've already created. So they won't be, out there on their own. They'll be rolled into our existing chapters.
That happened. Lee did that with 336. Some law enforcement,
Yeah.
yeah, rangers were added after the initial election. It's kind of a mini election.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah,
that means that they immediately get to go into that chapter and have those same protections.
Yeah, actually, you guys did that recently with 336 again. 336. So there's this weird quirk in federal labor law where it's kind of sounds offensive, like professionals have to vote to be represented in a unit with non-professionals, and they're just terms of art. But so we organized the professionals of the capital region. So it was just that we represented the non-professionals, but now we represent everybody. And that was very lucky because they now have the benefits of the contract, because we also had the foresight to think of that, like, oh, they're coming.
yeah, yeah. That was another good win.
Yeah.
So
So we
before we wrap up, we often have share a testimony from an employee. I know we're over, but if we've got a moment, would love to ask Travis if you're still here, if you wanted to join and just give a quick statement about kind of what's at stake here and why employees are organizing.
Yes, thank you, Lee. I did write a little something down, so I will go ahead and state that because I've been doing this for a while now. So the union and getting out to vote is important to me as as we've been hearing tonight, a pathway for us in the National Park Service as workers to have our voice be heard and advocated for. And it's allowed me to, I've met a bunch of folks I've not interacted with before, and I feel I'm better for it. As how this year's gone. And it's also shown, as like Sarah's pointed out, that we do have to fight for our jobs. And this has given myself and many others you continue to hear from an outlet from all this frustrations from the past year. And everything from even before the year, it's a way for us to work towards a path towards a positive future. And personally, I want to secure protections and improve our workplace for not only those of us who continue to protect and preserve the NPS today, but also for those who have yet to even join the NPS. And I want to be part of these historic changes for the Park Service and help to leave that legacy moving forward. And I truly believe this is too important not to be a part of. And I appreciate the support, every single one of you that continue to show up and give your time and energy for each other. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Travis.
Okay, we did have one more question that popped up in the chat about the agency challenging the appropriateness of a regional unit versus individual park units. And Sarah, you're welcome to jump in on this. We do already have a regional unit that's in place, and so we do have some precedent with NPS regional units. But Sarah, I'll leave it to you if you want to jump in.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought of, I mean, I do honestly think that that's how that will be held up. I don't know, and maybe Joni would have more experience or organizing team about stalling tactics, but that it shouldn't be a problem. Um,
Yeah, I would agree with Sarah. Hi, everyone. If I haven't met you before, I'm Joni. I work at NTU with Stephanie, Lee, and Sarah. They have, in our Intermountain region, and we suspect that we will see the same thing in the Pacific West region. They're challenging the appropriateness of the bargaining unit. We're not exactly sure what it is that they want. It's like Lee said this, and I think they're absolutely right. Oh, thank you. Hi. It's like they're throwing everything against the wall and hoping something sticks, right? So on one page, they're saying, well, you failed to include the two NPS chapters that you already represent in this petition. And then on another page, they said, well, this is too large of a region to be, put together and to be spoken for with one voice. I don't know what they're talking about. They don't know what they're talking about either. So it'll be really interesting. And I'm sure that Lee has already let those of you in the Intermountain region know that we are meeting with the agency and the FLRA this week. And so hopefully we'll get a better sense then of what it is exactly that they think they're doing. But I think, like Sarah said, that we have really good precedent with not only our unit in the National Capital Region, but another union has actually consolidated most of the parks in the Northeast region into one unit. So, but things are weird right now, so it's hard to say for sure, but we're certainly going to fight for it.
Thank you, Joni. We are over on time, so if you have additional questions, please reach out to me, to Lee, to Joni. And if there are questions for Sarah, we can get those questions to Sarah and get those answered. But we will wrap up for tonight, but not until I thank Sarah for giving all of the time that you gave us tonight and such great information. I know it was really, really appreciated. And anybody who wasn't able to attend can watch the video and and get a really good idea of how this actually works in action from your experiences. So thank you very much. And I know it's late where you are, so we're going to wrap up. And our next Empower Hour is February 9th, and that's just going to be a union basics, kind of a union 101 for anybody who needs a refresher on that, but also like our Midwest region and some of our parks that are just jumping into this organizing process to get the big picture of the process. And then on February 23rd, we have another Empower Hour that is going to be getting into the nuts and bolts of, acting like a union. So what does a union look like? And how do you move from this organizing mindset to taking advantage of your power and your power in numbers and acting like a union? So we'll have some guests who have experienced that for the 23rd of February. Thanks again, everyone. Good night, and until next time.